Hello and welcome back to Wortley Hall Walled Garden. It's a warm summer's evening in the middle of August, so these onions have been growing since 1st of May in this area, first week of May. So as you can see now, I think they're about ready. They won't get any bigger than that. We sowed them in middle of February in a greenhouse with a little bit of heat, not a lot. Daytime temperatures just the ambient, and then at night a little bit of gas fire just to make sure it wasn't too cold at night. Sown Intercell trays. As you can see down here, they're growing mainly as 2s and 3s. The idea being that we can stop them getting too big, because if they're grown singly, they've got a habit of growing too big and you end up with one onion that weighs over half a kilo. And when you try and sell them, especially to box schemes, they don't want one great big onion because people can't necessarily deal with just one big onion. So trying to grow them a bit smaller, around 200 gram mark, is about right. So we just sown them in mid-February in cell trays, prepared this land during April. Bit of compost, working in the green manure that we've been growing here previously, which was mostly rye, which is great for making the soil nice and friable, bringing up the nutrients that might have been left in the soil for the previous year, and then banking that back into the soil for the onions once it's been ploughed back under. Then we've laid this biomulch, which I think I've mentioned before, which is made from cornstarch, so it's fully biodegradable. It's wonderful in terms of suppressing weeds and holding moisture in, especially with onions that don't have a big leaf mass to shade out their growing space. So it's very easy for weeds to dominate over an onion crop, despite hours and hours of weeding effort. So this material has saved us hours of work and also has increased our yields by about 1/3, which is standard for what people expect to get from it. So these onions have grown very well since then, and as I say, it's mid-August now. We've had a lot of rain overnight. It's very humid and hot at the moment. Some of them, the neck has just bent over, which is giving an indication that they're not going to grow anymore. All they're going to do is sort of ripen, which basically ripening or curing of onions is really above all about the skin drying off and the neck drying up, so that the fleshy leaves inside that make up the bulb can be preserved for a long period of time, which is convenient for us. We can store them somewhere until we want to use them. These will store, if cured properly, into the new year, although we'll be looking to get them sold probably by October. There'll be quite a demand for them, I think. Some of these have still got their neck upright, so I wouldn't be trimming them or anything, but what I will be doing now is lifting them out the ground. They're coming out very easily, which is showing that they're giving up growing now. I'm just worried that if we leave them in this very damp soil in these conditions, we might get a little bit of bottom rot, which would be sort of like a mouldy, white mould type growth around the base here and around the side of the roots there. And that could compromise the ability of the onion to set a good skin and therefore stop them drying out properly and being storable. They could even rot fully from that, although usually they would just sort of have a compromised skin, and that just reduces how long that they'll keep for. So to avoid that, I think our job tomorrow is to lift these and let them dry out, either in situ with their bottoms set up like that so they can dry out fully, or we might move them up onto our tennis court area, which is a hard standing, so that even if it rains on balance this time of year, they'll dry out properly like that. That means the sooner that the onions are removed from this patch of land, we can get this ready for winter. And in the case of the onion crop here, that will mean mostly sowing rye, Hungarian grazing rye, which is a really good hardy grass which will collect, sort of mine the nutrients that are in this soil, bank them, hold them safely in the green leaf of the grass through the winter, protect the soil from the cold and from excess rainfall, keep the soil nice and friable, so when it comes to the spring we want to get the next crop in here, the soil will be in really, really good condition, both nutritionally and in its mechanical, physical properties. So that would be our plan by the middle of September, to have had this all sown and established with rye. The slight problem with growing rye in this garden is that there's lots of pheasants and, above all, pigeons. If I sow rye into bare soil, they will see it germinating and they'll eat it. And I don't get any rye growing, so we have to trick them a little bit by, we've got all these grass paths around the site, so once I've sown the rye, we will mow the grass, collect and bag the mowings and scatter them across the bare ground. And as the rye seedlings germinate and pop up through the grass mowings, the birds don't notice them, and it camouflages them from being attracted to them. And that way we can get rye without the birds eating it. These are Aosta, which is a modern organic commercial variety of onion. This variety over here, which is a nice dark red colour, maybe a slightly stronger taste than the white or brown onions. This variety is Robelia. And somewhere down here, I've got these nice big roots down here. See, that's a single onion on its own. It's got a little bit big, even where it's just two together. Yes, they're small, but they're still quite large. This variety is good old-fashioned Styron, which often you can buy as sets from the shops or for mail order. Been around for years, but it's still, also from seed, a really reliable, disease-resistant and high-yielding, trouble-free variety. So that's our work cut out for us tomorrow, is lifting these onions. There's roughly about 10 to 12,000 onions here, and we've got a different onion variety down this path here, which we'll just have a quick look at. And I'll also mention while we're here, one onion has gone to seed, i.e. bolted. Now, I know that when you grow from sets, so a baby onion, you get this more often. So although sowing onion seed is a bit more effort than just buying sets and popping them into the ground, the reason I bother to do it is one, expense, because it's more expensive to buy sets than to buy a packet of seeds, but also when you grow from seed, you get very few of your plants going to seed like this. This is quite rare to get this when you sow from seed, where it's potentially quite common with onion sets, especially lower quality ones. So that's one little thing there. And then further down here we've got one other variety of onion that went in more recently than May, probably in about June. They don't take long to grow. They're a Japanese bunching onion. They're a bit like spring onions, but they don't grow a bulb. They're just like that, just straight. They're quite a mild tasting onion. I think in Japanese cuisine they would probably be put in soups, and chopped up as a garnish in various dishes. They really like to blanch them, so what they would also do is before they got this big, they would earth them up to get more of that white shaft, almost like you would do with a leek, or with celery even. But we're selling them sort of as an easy growing, easy to grow version of a spring onion. And what we can do also is we can grow them several in the cells that we start them off in and plant them out like that. So almost every time you lift up these, you've got a bunch ready made up. All we've got to do is put a rubber band around them and we've got a bunch made up. So again, a nice easy crop to market. And that's a Japanese variety of bunching onion called Ishikura. And I recommend them. They're very easy to grow. They're easier to grow than our spring onions and slightly milder flavour, so they're worth a try. You can just see these onions here have wilted prematurely in comparison to the rest of the onions in the area. That's suspicious, and what you can see just on the base is a little bit of white fungal growth there. Just a little bit of onion white rot, not a serious level of it, it's only sporadic across the crop, but that's one of the reasons why I now want to remove this crop from the ground, because they don't want to grow anymore. They've done their growing. So we remove them from the soil, we won't get any more infection, and the onions will dry off and cure satisfactorily. We've got 3 large polytunnels, large in the sense that they're about 29.5 metres long, 100 foot, and about 7.2 metres wide, which is 25 or so foot wide. They're quite interesting in the sense that because they're long, you could get issues with poor ventilation. So we've done 2 things to make sure they don't get too hot in here. One is it's on a slight slope, which is probably hard to tell just looking on a screen, but believe me, it's on a very slight slope. And that means that as hot air builds up inside here, it'll rise up the hill and out through the main doors here. And also what we've got is side ventilation system. So we've got mesh up here up to about a metre or so high, and then if it's a hot day we can let the covering go down to let more air in, or if it gets cold or we want to grow a crop that wants to be hot and humid, we can bring the cover up higher, and that will close down some of the ventilation. In the winter we probably have them almost closed, although even in the winter you want some ventilation, otherwise you'll get stale air, you could get mildews and moulds growing, which is not desirable. It's a very hot evening today, so I don't want it too hot, so I'm going to open it up again. And then in here we've got early beans, early climbing beans. These beauties here is a variety called Blauhilde. I really like purple beans. Yes, they grow well, they taste nice. It's a bit weird when you cook them because they lose the purple colour and they go a bit grey-green. What I really like about them though is purely in the sense of they're easy to harvest. You can see where they are against the green foliage. So it makes it much easier for all of us to harvest them. When they're mature, so if you don't get around to picking them on time, they do form beans that will get quite large eventually. You can't see much in here yet, but just begin to form little beans inside there now. They'll become sort of a beigey coloured bean if they were left longer, and they also can be cooked as a haricot bean. Really tasty that way. But at the moment we're just harvesting them as a tender pod bean, and that's really popular. And further down we've got a green variety. Down here, let's walk down this jungle of beans. You see a lot of yellow foliage now. They're coming to the end. We've been harvesting them for quite a few weeks now. We've got an outdoor crop which is replacing them from about now. There's a bit of overlap, but these will finish soon. Then down here we had an even earlier crop of green beans, Cobra, and some of these now are actually forming beans in here which we'll leave to mature. And these will turn eventually into a black bean. They haven't matured yet, so they're actually white with a purple hilum there at the moment, but they'll turn black, and they're a particularly tasty bean for cooking into chilies and stews and things like that. So we do leave some on for that, both to sow for next year, to collect for our seed bank when we have our seed swap events, and also just to sell to people to cook and use them as the way I've described. On this side, I think partly because the Wortley site's quite a cold site, high altitude, we like growing celery, but celery doesn't quite grow well enough in the climate here, so we grow it in the polytunnel. Bit of a luxury, but it grows really well inside here. There's a late crop there that needs weeding, but the main early crop of celery is all the way along here. I think it's doing rather well. And I'll just take an example of so there's sort of familiar one of the sticks there, so we could probably start harvesting this from now on. A few little strings there, but I don't think they're strings that you couldn't eat. Shall I just try? You can probably hear that's quite crispy. I really like celery. The key to celery as well as growing in a warm environment like the polytunnel is all these irrigation lines. So I'll point one out here. This is a soaker hose made from recycled rubber tyres. They make it so it's slightly porous. So when you put your hose attachment to it, it just leaks water out through it like a leaky hose and waters the crops. Good advantage of that as well is it means that the foliage stays dry. That reduces the chance of mould and mildew infection on the leaves because you're keeping the atmosphere a bit drier than you otherwise would, especially at the moment when it's very humid anyway. And we've done this for years and it's good results. This is a form of plantain. Plantain is something you see as a weed growing on paths usually. This one's got quite an interesting shape of leaf. It's actually edible and fairly rare. We've been putting it into our salad mixes this spring. I've left a load of it now to go to seed so that we've got a seed crop of it because I'd like to grow it through the winter as well because I think it's quite winter hardy. It's got these nice attractive long seed heads, so there's going to be a lot of seed here. It's interesting flavour that I can't quite describe, but it's got a lovely textured leaf, quite satisfying fleshy leaf, and sort of savoury flavour, but it's not bitter or harsh at all. So we'll grow more of that in the future. And then just along here, another crop we've been growing in the spring, just to add a little bit of sweetness to some of the salad mixes, is this plant here, which is now fully finished flowering and setting seed. And that's aniseed, which is incredibly sweet. Now in a sheltered garden, this would probably grow fine outside, but I'm just growing it in the polytunnel to make sure we get good seed set, because it likes a warm spot. But we've got thousands of seeds setting here now. And I suspect that if I try a bit of seed, it's incredibly sweet, amazingly sweet tasting seed. So I can almost eat that just as it is, let alone leaving it to set seed for sowing later. But again, that's something that we could sow late winter, early spring. Use that as a nice springtime sweetness to add to the salad mixes. Oh, that's incredibly sweet, those seeds, amazing.